Turns out he was murdered by this crazy man. That crazy man was traveling with a little girl. James, lower the gun.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my full Last of Us Episode 8 video. There was a whole bunch of Easter eggs and references to the game, so we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the episodes. Careful for spoilers if you haven't seen the episode yet, but we'll start at the beginning and work our way through shot by shot, talking about Easter eggs, WTF moments, and there were many. This was probably the most WTF episode of the series, and it was planned that way because it was pretty much the way it went down in the games. You're meant to be horrified by a lot of the things that David does. He's meant to be like one of the worst villains, if not the worst villain that you meet during the events of the first game. You're meant to feel like he's worse than the cordyceps fungus. He even talks about the fungus as if it is a god, and he worships it like you would worship the biblical god. That's how nutters he's meant to be. He is totally crazy. The title of the episode is When We Are in Need, which is a reference to Ellie's fight with David's group and the prayer that they have written on their banner, when we are in need, he shall provide, like their group treats Ellie as if she was sent by God to answer their prayers for food, and her getting the medicine from them and being able to save Joel's life. Technically, she saved herself at the end of the episode. Joel helped a lot, like he definitely helped by getting rid of a lot of their dangerous members of the group. But I think part of the idea is that had Ellie not gotten that penicillin, the medicine from them, Joel would have died. So in a way, they want to make you question, like, oh, maybe there was some faith aspect to this, like maybe there was some higher power. But in the games, David's group is affectionately referred to by the fans as the Cannibals. They did add a bunch of material that wasn't in the games just to round out the backstory of their group, give you a better vibe for the rest of the people in his group. Not all of them are meant to be terrible. Like as they explain, some of the people, like the little girl here, doesn't understand that she winds up eating her father, basically. The meat there definitely does not look or taste like venison. But some of the members of the group have to know what's really going on, what they're really doing, and some do not know. With most of the group thinking of him as this benevolent pastor trying to help them through this difficult time in the apocalypse, help them survive using religion, when really he is more like a cult leader the way that Ellie calls it. He even admits to that too, like, well, you got me there.
Is this some weird cult thing?
Well, you sort of kind of got me there.
The actual opening scene is of David's group with him reading from the Bible, Revelations 21, and they use it in the episode as a metaphor for the fungus in general, the apocalypse, and God cleansing the earth. But David later reveals that he'd been worshiping the fungus itself, the cordyceps fungus, this whole time. So really, when he's reading from this verse, David said he's read it to them many times over and over again. He's really been talking about how the fungus is going to wipe the earth clean and create this new paradise. But at the beginning of the episode, they want to make you think that it's just a rallying cry for their group because it's winter, there isn't enough food, people are starting to go hungry, and most of them have lost hope of survival. But even if you haven't played the game, you're meant to get this really weird vibe from David's character, like he just seems so creepy. So they weren't trying to hide the fact that something really sinister was going on, and it's meant to pay off that earlier quote from Joel a couple episodes ago where he told Ellie, no, you need to be more worried about actual people out here. The fungus, yes, it's a dangerous thing. You need to watch out for the infected. But really, the danger out here is actual people. People are worse than the fungus in the wilderness here. And David is meant to be like the worst version of that. After this scene, I also couldn't stop thinking about that old Simpsons Sideshow Bob joke where he tricks everyone into thinking that he's totally reformed and all peaceful, but really deep down, he just wants revenge against Bart Simpson.
No, that's German for the Bart. The.
No one who speaks German could be an evil man.
Some of you may have picked up on this earlier, but the whole idea, as David explains later when he's revealing the truth about his backstory to Ellie, is that he was always sick and twisted. He's always had a violent nature, and the fungus, the apocalypse, the last 20 years, just allowed him a way to let that all out, like it gave him excuses to express his diabolical tendencies. And he used to be a math teacher, so you wonder if he actually used to prey on little kids like this when he was a math teacher. He basically said he's been this way the whole time. Like all the worst things you've ever heard priests being arrested for or charged with, that's David, and he is legitimately a cult leader at this point, the way that their group operates. Like I said, Ellie calls it pretty accurately at the beginning of the episode. And it also seems like during the episode, characters like James, played by Troy Baker, big video game cameo, I'll talk about him more in a second, it seems like other people kind of know what's really going on with him and either turned a blind eye or they wind up dying themselves and being turned into food. Like, that's their option. Either we tell you what's really going on and you go along with it, or you become our next meal. Once you've actually seen the episode, you go back and watch it again. Every time you see him talking to younger characters like these little girls here, it just makes it so much creepier. The little girl's father that they're waiting till spring to bury is meant to be one of the people Joel and Ellie killed at the university, as he reveals later, and they also reveal he was lying. He wasn't waiting to bury him till spring. The ground is meant to be frozen, but them not wanting to bury him was because they were going to chop him up into food. Like, we can't bury the body because we need the body. The whole weird vibe between James and David's character is just meant to show you that even though James definitely knows what's really going on, like we're definitely going around eating people, most of the members of their group are just doing what they can to survive and feel incredibly remorseful about it. It's only David who's meant to come off being the truly evil person in the episode. Like, everyone's doing terrible things, but David is the truly evil one. If you didn't recognize him right away, James is played by Troy Baker, who does the voice of Joel in the video games. He will come back and do Joel again if they do more scenes with him during Last of Us 3. No spoilers about how that would go down because they'd have to use it in a really creative way.
I don't mean to question your sense of mercy, David. We can let her go. We bring that girl back with us. She's just another mouth to feed.
Here's how this thing's gonna play out. You don't bring up Tess. Ever. In fact, we just keep our histories to ourselves.
But they said one of the reasons why Troy Baker didn't wind up playing the TV show version of Joel instead of Pedro Pascal, because Troy Baker is a good actor, is mostly because of his look and the vibe of him just in general. The showrunner and Neil Druckmann said that in real life, Troy Baker is kind of like this really tall, very hippie-like character, just like very chill, very much not like Joel at all. And Pedro Pascal just did a much better job of portraying Joel on screen, like live-action Joel. But I did think that Troy Baker did a great job in this episode, so maybe we'll see him popping up in more live-action stuff after this. That would be funny if he came back in Season 2 as a completely different character, like, wait a minute, you look kind of familiar. Ellie continues to nurse Joel back to health, slowly feeding him, and the next part is right out of the game. She goes out hunting for food. The minor differences here is that she was using a bow in the games, and she's using a rifle here. Maybe they'll give her the bow in Season 2. The rabbit, also right out of the games, is where the meme came from, except on the show she fails to kill it in a huge face plant, but the deer is pretty accurate to the games, and the way she winds up running into David and James. She winds up wounding it and then following it to the area where David and James are, where they find the deer and then Ellie finds them.
Any sudden moves, I put one right between your eyes. Ditto for Buddy Boy.
Any sudden moves and I put one right between your eyes. Ditto for Buddy Boy over there. What do you want?
Name's David. This here's my friend James. What do you need? Weapons? Ammo? Clothes?
Medicine.
We can trade you for some of the deer. What do you need? We have boots.
Medicine?
One of the minor differences, though, in their interaction here, even though a lot of the dialogue is similar to the games, is that the TV show version of David comes off feeling so much more nice at the beginning, so that the turn later in the episode, like the twist to him revealing his true evil nature, winds up being way more impactful. In the games, David was played by Nolan North, who did a fantastic performance. Nolan North is amazing.
How did you put it? Tiny pieces.
How did you put it? Tiny little pieces?
But when you meet David in the games, he just comes off feeling more creepy at the beginning, so it's not as big of a surprise later when you find out, oh yeah, he's definitely creepy and wants to kill us. So I think TV show David actually wound up delivering an even better version of the performance, like the person who is truly evil but hides under a mask of goodness. When he tells James to go back and get the medicine that Ellie asked for in trade, the reason why he's confused, why James is confused, is because they barely have any supplies as it is, and he doesn't want to give away critical medicine. He also has a similar conversation later when he tells David, like, look, we should not bring this girl back. She's going to be another mouth to feed. It'll just be bad for all of us. They make it seem like James has started to figure out, or he already knows what's really going on with David, like, oh, you are definitely bad. And maybe he was trying to do something about it and just couldn't bring himself to do it, like couldn't bring himself to actually rebel against him. So as bad as James came off in the episode, like he tried to kill Ellie and advocated for killing her many times, that was the more merciful of the two options to Ellie. Because David has far worse things planned for her, turning Ellie into his own personal plaything. You notice during their initial exchange here how much Ellie has learned. She discharges all the bullets from their rifles, which is a smart move. The scenes right after this with Ellie and David alone together also similar to the game, where initially she mistrusts him correctly, but he slowly starts to wear her down with his false kindness, lulling her into a false sense of security. until he reveals the truth that he's figured out who they really are, and they're the ones that killed the members of their group back at the university. That turn is also right out of the games, too. He also mentions that he was from the Pittsburgh quarantine zone originally, and it was destroyed in 2017, which would have been about 6 years ago. They also referenced the Pittsburgh quarantine zone earlier on the show, but it has a much bigger connection to the plot in the games because the TV show actually swapped Pittsburgh in the games with the Hunters for Kansas City. In the games, Joel and Ellie wind up encountering the Hunters, Sam, and Henry's character inside Pittsburgh, but they just changed that to Kansas City on the show. David claims that he fled the Pittsburgh quarantine zone with a few others. They slowly traveled to this area where they are now, evading raiders along the way, picking up new people along the way. And I think they want David's group's turn to cannibalism to be a parallel for what happened to Joel when he joined the Hunters on his way to the Boston quarantine zone, like all the terrible stuff that Joel and Tommy felt very remorseful about what they'd done. David's meant to be the darker mirror of that, like he's not sorry about what they've turned to, what they've done. When he tries to convince Ellie that destiny is a real thing, like he's been praying to what we think is God that he later reveals is actually the cordyceps fungus, it's meant to be a callback to the Bible quote from their banner. Like he's really trying to say that them running into Ellie and the dead deer was a gift from God, or the fungus, because he's been worshiping the fungus. Ask and ye shall receive, he shall provide in your time of need. Suddenly they find the dead deer waiting for them to eat, which they'd been hunting for specifically, and a little girl who David had wanted to find this whole time. He'd been praying to the fungus that he would find someone like Ellie. James returns, trapping Ellie. The reason, again, that David wants to give her the medicine is to lure her into a false sense of security, because at least at first, he wants to win her over with his kindness, as sinister as it is. Also, this is near their area. David knows that this town is here, so he thinks that he'll be able to find Joel pretty easily, so he's not that worried about that part. Then things really turn in the episode. Things really get bad when they show this scene of the group preparing a meal. It's meant to allude to their cannibalism. If you haven't played the games, you might have suspected something was weird about this, but later when they bring in the deer after the fact, after they say that it was venison, that's meant to be the confirmation of what was really happening here when they were preparing the meat. So the idea here is that this woman lost her husband, the little girl's father. They needed food. She brings in the cans and says, we're running out. We barely have any. Where did this meat come from? And the guy lies and says that it's venison. Really, this is her dead husband that they just chopped up. As they finish preparing the meal, everyone grabs their portion and starts to eat. The little girl is basically eating her father and the woman her dead husband. You also notice how when the little girl screams for him to kill Ellie and David, the music turns really dark as he slaps her. He also orders her to think of him as her father, which is kind of the vibe of what happens with Ellie later. You start to worry about what he's going to do to this little girl eventually too, and his true nature starts to show even more. The reason why he reacted that way is because he does plan to keep Ellie alive, as we find out later in the episode, for terrible things. And when he says bring Joel to justice, he's basically saying we're going to turn Joel into our next meal. Right after he says the prayer and they start eating the food, he's basically the only one with a smile on his face as they're eating the woman's dead husband and her father. And he's sitting right in front of them, knowing full well exactly what's happening. That's how evil he's meant to be. This is like right out of the South Park episode where Eric Cartman fed the kid his dead father.
You like it? Do you like it, Scott? I call it Mr. and Mrs. Tenorman chili.
As Ellie feeds their horse, she learns that David's group has returned to try and capture them. She tries to lead them away, leaving Joel with his knife. James takes out the horse, R.I.P., he was a good horse, and the fall renders her unconscious and easy for David to haul back to his makeshift prison. But you remember the whole thing here, Troy Baker, James' character, trying to kill her would almost have been a mercy, like getting rid of her early would have been the better option for her, just because what David had planned for her was so much worse. So as bad as James is in the episode, as bad as Troy Baker's character was, he was the better of the two options. The others go looking for Joel, and he has a huge rally moment, choking out and killing all the members there, eventually torturing a couple of them, which is also right out of the games. He goes full Liam Neeson on both of them. I'm a man with a particular set of skills, looking for a daughter. There were a lot of people that expected this because they played the games and were hoping that he'd be interrogating James so that you'd have like a Joel versus Joel kind of moment, but obviously the showrunner, the producers didn't want to be that on the nose with it. Like, will the two Joels meet each other on screen? Nope, turns out not. Ellie wakes up in David's prison cell in the butcher room where they butcher people. It's right out of the games where she slowly starts to learn about David's true nature and his plans for her. She sees the ear discovering the truth, like, oh, you plan on chopping us up into little bits. And David tries to argue the finer points of morality with her in the apocalypse and justifying his actions by saying he's doing all this to save everyone in his group is no different than Joel killing people to save you. He confirms that he's always been violent like this, and he senses the violence in Ellie, which is a thing. Like Neil Druckmann, the showrunner, did say that Ellie is meant to have violent tendencies, and being with Joel has brought that out of her, but her time with Joel has made both of them better people. Whereas David is meant to go in the opposite direction, like it only makes him more evil. And he's just gotten very good at hiding his true nature beneath this mask of serenity and goodness in the apocalypse. Like you thought eating people and torturing little girls was bad, he also believes that the fungus is a god that should be worshipped. That's how crazy he's meant to be. The whole vibe of David's character in the games is very similar to this. Like I said, Nolan North did a great job of pulling off this turn where he goes even crazier later in this adventure.
You have no idea what I'm capable of.
But I think the TV show version of David takes it like that extra mile, like he goes extra crazy in the episode. And I love the way that they cut the tension in this next moment too, where just for a brief hot second, they want to make you wonder if Ellie is willing to sacrifice herself in order to save Joel. Like if she joins David willingly, he'll spare their lives, even though it's probably a lie. He'd probably wind up killing Joel no matter what. But she winds up using the opportunity to break his finger and trying to escape again, which is classic Ellie. Hell no, she's not going to be his child bride. Somebody get Chris Hansen on the phone. Is he still alive in the apocalypse? We need some help here. To Catch a Predator, The Last of Us edition. Most of the end of the episode is similar to the games too, where Joel winds up arriving at the town to help save her, but Ellie also winds up saving herself. It's meant to be a team effort, like Joel took out a bunch of their group before he arrived, making it a little bit easier for her to escape. He winds up finding her backpack, the dead deer, and a bunch of dead human bodies waiting to be butchered, confirming everyone's fears and suspicions during the episode, like, oh yeah, they're definitely chopping people up to eat them. Every time David has lamented and said prayers over the dead members of their group, really is them just chopping them up for food. You wonder how some of those people died too, like were they killed on purpose or did they die by accident? Ellie trying to use her condition to save herself the infection is also out of the games. R.I.P. to Troy Baker, she winds up killing James while she escapes. Then when she lights the fire in the lodge, this is meant to be a big biblical metaphor for the devil. Like David is meant to feel like the biblical devil because of what he's trying to do, how evil he is, and they want to make the room feel kind of like it's hell, burning. For a brief hot second, Ellie is trapped in metaphorical hell with the devil. Just before she escapes, he references becoming her creepy dad, teaching her, quote unquote, just like he told the other little girl at the beginning of the episode, showing the depths of his depravity. And after stabbing the hell out of him, better double tap that corpse. She breaks out and finds Joel, with both of them just breaking down completely, and Joel referring to her as baby girl, like a dad would. So this is really meant to be a moment that crystallizes their relationship, the trauma that they both just went through. He openly acknowledges her like a dad would his daughter, and she thinks of him as a father figure. Papa bless. Now let's get out of here. Overall, even though it felt like a quick episode, it was great. TV show David, like I said, so much creepier than the video game David, even though Nolan North's performance in the game is also great. If you spotted any other Easter eggs or references in the episode that I didn't mention in the video, just write them below in the comments. Next week, episode 9 is meant to be the finale. I will do an episode 9 trailer video, and they will be covering the rest of the plot from the first game. So even if it feels like a speed run, there is still a lot of plot to cover, like a lot of really big twists and turns in the finale, even though the episode itself is meant to be relatively short next week. They've already confirmed Season 2, and Season 2 will adapt the first half of the plot at least, maybe a little bit less than that of the first game. They could even break the second game into 3 different seasons if they wanted to. That's just because there's so much more plot that actually happens in the second game than the first game. The first game is much shorter in runtime than the second game. My full episode 9 video will post next week after they release it, and big reminder too, talk about Pedro Pascal into the Pascalverse. The Mandalorian Season 3 episodes have started. My full Mandalorian Season 3 Episode 2 video will also post this week on Wednesday. Everyone click here for that Last of Us Episode 9 video. I'll update the link as soon as I post it. And click here for all my Mandalorian Season 3 episodes. Thank you so much for watching. Everyone stay safe, and this is the way.